Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Welcome, everybody. Instead, we'll get right into it in just a second with our guest. Tomorrow, Megan Daum, brilliant writer. Thursday, Dr. Ashley Tapscott, very interesting urologist. I interviewed her today, and she's got a lot to say, and Megan, not short on words herself. Speaking of words, let's talk about education. Today's guest is Ben Nelson, founder of Minerva University, the most selective university in the country, by far, with the best graduate school placements, and you've not heard of it in all probability. You're going to find out why. The acceptance rate of Minerva is lower than any Ivy League university, and Minerva's assessments change every year. They're designed to evaluate cognitive, social, emotional skills, not inherently detected in standardized testing, and yet they have figured out a way to pick the best students. Let's bring in my guest, Ben Nelson. Ben, how are you? Good to see you.
Doing great, Drew.
So explain how this happened again.
Well, it happened because, as I think we're now getting a much clearer view with all of these admission scandals and playing with rankings and lying to U.S. News and all the rest, that the typical Ivy League admissions process, typical university admissions process is broken. And you have a group of universities that haven't really changed their incoming class, despite the fact that the population has gotten much bigger, that students want and desire and deserve spots at these institutions over time. And instead, what they do is they use all sorts of proxies to figure out how rich the applicants are while claiming that they have a need-blind admissions process. And so we decided to create a completely reimagined university, vastly better education, better student experience, where the students live together as adults, not as children, in the heart of some of the world's great cities. They live in 7 different cities around the world during their 4 years, traveling as a cohort around the world. And we use an admissions process that doesn't just select for rich applicants. It selects for the best of the best. And it turns out that those students come from every socioeconomic background you can imagine, because talent is indeed distributed around the world. And we managed to go out and find that talent and bring it into Minerva.
And you were saying we noticed this problem with admissions process. Who was we?
Well, I started Minerva on my own years and years ago, but very quickly assembled a team to take the concept into a reality. So put together a team of 30 or 40 core team members to design every aspect of the university, from the admissions process to the curriculum, to the student experience, to what happens when they're on the ground in all of these different countries, all the way to figuring out the visa situation. Actually, probably the hardest thing that we do is figuring out how to get students from 70 different nationalities visas to 7 different countries every year. So probably not the least trivial thing we do. And so that core group of individuals came together to build the university. And now the university has almost 200 faculty, staff, support all over the world for these students.
And what did you do before all this?
Well, when I was way younger, when I was actually an undergrad, is when I started thinking through all of these aspects of how to create an ideal university. But I spent almost all of my career in the internet space, and spent the bulk of my career, 10 years, at a company called Snapfish, eventually being its CEO, and saw how you can take a relatively small enterprise that was doing photo printing, your photo books and calendars and prints, etc., and actually expand it dramatically all over the world. We were operating in 22 different countries, but we were also partnering with incumbent photo processors, the Walmarts, the Walgreens, the Costcos of the world, and taking our approach to photo processing and photo sharing and bringing it to those incumbent providers. And it made me realize that if you really want to change systems, you've got to figure out the best way to do that by actually working directly with the end user, but then helping reform and change the incumbents. And that's effectively what we're doing at Minerva, creating a university which is the absolute best education for the end learner, but then working to help other universities reform their education in that mold such that we can have a much bigger impact over time and around the world.
I think I asked you this before and I don't remember the answer. You call it a university and not a college. That implies a graduate program. Is there a graduate program part of this?
Yeah, so we have already one master's program that's already live, master's in decision analysis. And unlike the undergraduate program, which is residential, the master's program is for working executives and professionals. And so it's people who want to learn how to make better systematic decisions and think systematically. And they do it part-time while they're working from around the world. And so it gives them access to the incredible Minerva education. It's a 21-month program. And the beauty of it is it's only $40,000 for the entire degree. So it's a really amazing opportunity for people to get this kind of systematic thinking later on in life.
Talk more about the program for the undergraduates. And I'm assuming that it's all accredited by all of the agencies and whatnot. Is there any issues there? Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. So the program is accredited by WASC, which is the accreditor that accredits Stanford and Caltech and Berkeley. Accreditors in the United States are done by state as opposed to by on a national basis. And so the universities and colleges in California, at least the ones that you've heard of, are all accredited by the same accreditor that we are. And on the surface of it, the Minerva program looks like any other university in the accredited world. We go for 4 years. There are 2 semesters per year. All of your professors are PhDs from the very best universities. 100% of our classes, which is atypical, have fewer than 20 students. And so you get this personalized attention. There are majors and minors and a general education. So everything looks at the surface pretty copacetic, but underneath is where we've done all of the reform of what the program actually is. And so first, from who we educate. So the student body, as I mentioned before, is the most socioeconomically diverse student body of any highly selective university in the country. Then what we teach, rather than centering students on information transmission, your Econ 101, 102, your Physics 101, 102, which you can frankly just read the book. You don't really need to sit in a lecture and pay thousands of dollars for the privilege. Instead, we've created systems of thinking classes where we teach these 4 systems of thinking, these cognitive tools that then students apply no matter what it is that they study later on. And all of our upper level courses are interdisciplinary. So they actually are at the intersection of fields. And then the way we teach, which is in this pedagogical method called fully active learning that we've developed, that's based on 40 years of research on how the brain actually functions and how students retain information and, most importantly, learn how to apply it originally to where we teach, which is that global rotation, living in the heart of these amazing cities. The students spend about a year in San Francisco at the beginning and end of their 4 years, and then in the interim, travel and live together in 6 other countries around the world. They go to Seoul, Taipei, Hyderabad, Berlin, London, Buenos Aires, before coming back to San Francisco for graduation. And so everything about the program itself in a substantive way is rethought, whereas the surface, the accreditation, the 120 credit hours, et cetera, is all done in a relatively straightforward way.
And you were telling me you get crazy quality placements in terms of graduate schools and then performance in graduate schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you actually get extraordinary students and you teach them how to think systematically, you teach them how to then apply what it is that they've learned in a formal classroom in the day-to-day world, from one culture to another, from one work experience to another, an internship to another, you're going to get vastly better prepared graduates. And graduate schools realize that, employers realize that, and even entrepreneurship. The students that have graduated from Minerva that start their own businesses and companies are vastly more successful than their peers at previous institutions or other institutions, that is, despite the fact that we're a relatively new university. We've already seen some really outrageous success stories. And so not only is
Somebody's
this a small,
asking,
yeah,
do you get supplemental funding from the Department of Education?
we do not. So even though we are accredited and even though we're eligible for federal financial aid, we don't accept federal financial aid. And now that may seem a little bit odd, but there are two reasons for that. Reason number one is that the vast majority of our students aren't American. And therefore, the vast majority of your students wouldn't even be able to take advantage of those funds, despite the fact that they're from very low socioeconomic backgrounds. But the second reason is that we mentioned earlier about accreditation. Accreditation is done at a regional level, which means that the federal government really has very little say as to how a university operates. It's ceded that to their accreditors, and the way they exert their influence is through federal financial aid dollars. And so, in order to get those federal financial aid dollars, you have to comply with reams of regulations just to get access to that money. And the cost is so high that it would actually counteract all of the value that we would get or that our students would get directly from those federal funds. And so it's actually
Mm-hmm.
more efficient for us to go and raise private philanthropic support for our scholarship programs rather than have to pay all of the compliance and regulatory costs that are associated with Title IV, which is the programs that are associated with federal financial aid.
How do you deal with lab sciences in all these various campuses?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are really two kinds of science or types of interactions you have in the lab. One is when you actually do research, which we're big proponents of, and many of our students, in fact, all of our students who go on to do science PhDs later on at Harvard, at Berkeley,
Mhm.
et cetera, are get hands-on experience in labs, usually over the summer, but sometimes through labs in the cities that we're located in. So, for example, there are a number of labs in Seoul that employ Minerva students when they're there in their sophomore year because they love what they can do in the lab, et cetera. And we're big proponents of actually doing real research. But then there is how labs are usually used for undergraduates at universities, which is the lab classes. And the lab classes is not scientific research. It is go fill a pipette, mix these chemicals, follow a recipe book, do this, see that. My favorite story about this is Frances Arnold, who's a Nobel Prize winner at Caltech, recruits some of her undergraduates to actually do real research in her lab. And she asks them in the first day of her of the internship, she says, "Okay, how many of you remembered what I taught you in class?" And so, of course, everybody raises their hand, being a good student. And she says, "Okay, so now forget all of that. Now I'm going to teach you how to do science." And the reality is that my father's a molecular biologist, and I know that a lot of these lab classes are just check the box performative. They're not actually learning. If you want to learn how to do science, you've got to go and do science. More importantly, before you get into the lab, you have to actually understand the fundamental principles of science and how they apply. And so, in a curriculum like ours, which emphasizes not memorizing every step of the Krebs cycle and seeing if you can remember that, but understanding the underlying principles of science and how they apply, when our students show up in the lab, they're vastly more prepared. And that really is why it's so important to reform the nature of science education.
Yeah, I remember a lot of useless hours spent in the lab, but I also remember some pretty good experiences. And back in my day, everything was statistics and derivative logic. So in other words, we had to use these things called acrylamide gels, as I recall. We would use restriction enzymes and cut DNA segments up, and then have them sort of migrate on a gel, and we would have to figure out, we had to reason what we were looking at. We had to figure it out and make sense of it all. And then same thing even in biochemistry. I remember I don't remember what the test was, what the experiment was, but I was somehow looking at hydrogen ion flow through the membrane of a mitochondria, and people were just beginning to connect that to, essentially ATP production, and I was like, wait a minute, I've seen this before. Oh, I saw this exact same thing in microbiology. This is a bacterium membrane that's sitting in the middle of this cytoplasm. And I remember bringing that up to my biochemistry professor, and that was a thought that was just beginning to happen at the time. And I was like, of course that's what this is. I don't know how it got here, but that's what this is. So, but that was important to me to have some of the, I would say half was very important and half was very useless, I would say.
Yeah, actually, funny enough, my father spent a chunk of his career on ATPase in mitochondria, and so I ran those gels as a kid in his lab all the time, not knowing what they were all about, but at least I had that little scientific experiment myself.
Yeah, we'd have to figure out what we were looking at, and that was science. And another thing I learned, I was trained diligently in the null hypothesis and least square analysis. That was sort of my basic starting point, was null hypothesis, which isn't done anymore, and to a fault. That's why we have so much shitty research out there. It's just sort of observational and then statistical wrangling. But anyway, that's my sidebar for the moment. But back to the students. So talk more about what it is. Oh, by the way, are they learning the language and the culture wherever they're living? Is that encouraged? Is that requirement? How much of that happens?
Yeah. So in every place they go, they have an immersive learning class where they actually get to apply what they learn specifically to the culture where they are. From a language perspective, they're highly encouraged to learn it, but first and foremost, many of the places they go to, English is an official language. But secondly, we really try to get them immersed as much as possible rather than have official language classes. And so most of our students use Duolingo and find really creative ways to learn the local language and practice it when they're there.
Interesting. So take me back around to the admission process. And before you go there, tell me if you have any opinion on the fact that SAT is not used anymore in the UC system and various other places. Is that a good move or a bad move? And then you tell me about the Minerva process.
Yeah, well, it's in and of itself, it is neither good nor bad. The real question is, what is the application trying to get at? And then you have to look at the component parts and see, what is it actually getting at, as opposed to what is it purporting to get at. So let's look at a typical college application to a highly selective institution. You'll see an ask for an SAT score, right? Well, SATs are more correlated with household income than they are with IQ. And so that gives you a sense of what they indicate. You'll ask for a pre-written essay. Pre-written essays are even more correlated with household income than SATs are. So if you remove SATs and you keep the pre-written essay, you actually get a less diverse, socioeconomically diverse class as opposed to more. So that's something to think about. They ask you, of course, what high school you come from. Well, it turns out that a couple of hundred high schools account for almost 50% of the spots in the Ivy League. And guess what zip codes those high schools are from? And of course, most of them are private prep schools. And so they indicate wealth. They'll ask where your parents went to school, where your uncles and aunts and grandparents, et cetera, all to see if you indeed also come from a long line of graduates of these prestigious universities. Then, just to make absolutely sure they see how well-rounded you are, they'll ask you, do you sail? Do you row crew? Do you play tennis or golf professionally, right? Such that they could absolutely make sure that they get every ask. But they're, of course, need blind. And by the way, if all of that fails and you still do badly on your SATs and you still don't play an interesting sport, you can even get into a good prep school. But if daddy builds a building, you're still getting in. Right. In fact, we know during the Varsity Blue scandal, this is something that was not reported on. A district attorney that brought the charges the day he announced it said, quote, "It's not like their parents built a building here. They bribed a coach." Right. And so the reason that Aunt Becky went to jail wasn't because she bribed.
Aunt Becky.
It's because she didn't bribe the institution directly. And that's what the criminal act was. Bribing the institution directly is fine. Right. So all of this is to say that we love, you talk about the null hypothesis, we love looking at symptoms as opposed to root cause. The SAT is a symptom of the root cause of an admissions process that only cares about one thing: how rich are you? And then twist itself into pretzels to, quote unquote, include those people who don't belong, right? And say, oh, those people, well, they didn't qualify, right? And therefore, let's point fingers at them and say, yeah, those people we're including, right? But the people that get in legitimately, they belong here. And of course, the people that get in legitimately are just rich. And we buy into that language, right? We buy into this language of inclusivity, which effectively others people who actually belong at these institutions. And then we ignore all of the people who are there because Grandpappy built a building there, but that they don't, right? And so that's really why you have to rethink the admissions process. And the key to redoing an admissions process that makes sense isn't to follow the same book that the college counselors can hack. It means that you've got to change up every year. It means that you've got to ask things that you don't know why they're being asked. You've got to have a little bit of obfuscation there just to make sure that you maintain the integrity of the process, as opposed to, in fact, willingly allow it to be hacked so you have a richer student body.
Susan, do you have any questions about this? I see you leaning in there.
No.
Sorry
about the hammering in the background.
All right. We went through the admission process.
I mean, the SATs were not my kid's forte. I mean,
Jordan did well.
Well, he did okay.
And he got like a nearly perfect.
Well, yeah, but it didn't help him get into Ivy League schools of his choice.
That's true.
But we were in a prep school, but they also would say, okay, this is your reach, this is your safe one, whatever. And we went to 22 colleges. And we looked at all of them, and the schools they get into, they did great. Even the ones that were reaches that they weren't supposed to get into, they did great. And because they were good, solid B+ average students all the way through, from when they were a baby till they got out of their graduate school. But it was funny because it was just so competitive then. I don't know what it's like post-COVID, but that SAT and ACT, if you had any problems with it, it just completely screwed you because, they didn't do
prep courses.
Well, no, they didn't have to do any kind of, the kind of testing through all the way through because they didn't have
standardized testing
because
they went to a school that didn't have standardized
but they were 12 years, so when they were in the third grade they didn't have to get into middle school or whatever it was and get into high school by taking these tests, so they kind of let those go. And Douglas had a disorder and we didn't really know about it, and he had to go get extra time and all this when he was a junior in college after he had totally prepped for the SAT. Then he had to prep for the ACT because the SAT wouldn't let you get extra time and blah, 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 because he has like ADD or something from his brain surgery when he was a baby that we just sort of let ride. And he was a great student. He didn't need extra time in high school. But, I found since I had 3 going at the same time, I found it to be kind of, not a really good way to know your student. Like all my kids had great writing skills. They came from a school with really good, math skills and critical thinking, and they were just like, they were smart, but that test was just because it was stuff that they learned in the 7th grade. They don't remember all that. Some kids are really good at that stuff and they do great and they get into Harvard and they get into Yale easily. But my kids, man, it was hard. And it was discouraging, after all 12 years that they worked so hard, to just get their test scores back, which were, it's like it wasn't.
Because that's exactly what happens, right? Because it's really a parallel system. They go through schooling for 12 years and life growth and learning on their own and becoming whole and better people. And then there's this parallel world of college admissions that if you don't spend the money on that, forget actually making your kids better and more holistic people, right? Forget training them for life or getting them ready to be positive contributors to society, right? If you don't take your resources and shift it to getting them into college, right? Then the college, they don't try to look at the other stuff. They have a formula and they want to see how many people are going to spend the money to get them in. And by the way, there is a dirty little a secret to some of this as well. I once asked a former college administrator, I said, I'm curious, why is it that when you look at the PhD programs at universities, half of the students are not American. But when you look at the undergraduate programs, only 10% are not American. So why is it that the same institution will bring in so many more non-Americans in their graduate programs than they do in the undergraduate programs? And the administrator didn't try to say, oh, national this, national that. He said, oh, it's very simple. It's lifetime value. He says, international students donate a lot less than undergraduates. And undergraduates are of particular backgrounds donate a lot more. And so what universities do is they see how much money families are willing to invest in their kids' education because it's highly correlated with who's going to cut them the big check. And they're just in the business of finding not only people who have means, but people who have means and will deploy them towards funding the university. And unfortunately,
I agree with that.
Right, this is how the institutions that get to pick.
It's true because they hit us up too. I mean, it was like, well, if we let you in, we hope that you'll donate money, and we had to, but I always felt like we had that advantage, even though they screwed up the SATs. But they aren't employed. They didn't get employed because of this. Like this is just an education, so now they can think of what they're going to do for a living. And that's what bothers me the most is that they're so overeducated and they don't. They're still trying to figure out how to get a job. And for me, like I worked until I was 27 and then I went to college. So I just knew how to get a job and always had a job. So I don't know. The money thing is really important for people who have the means, and the schools actually do look for that. And I agree with you.
It'd be interesting to see somebody put on the restream, where will Elon Musk's kids go? That will be interesting. Both because he's kind of an educational snob, a little bit, and he has all that money, and it'd be interesting to see where. I would think he'd go to something like Minerva.
But you also have to be super creative. Like, okay, for example, Douglas he had broken his leg in football and
Well,
fell
hold on.
behind.
So let's start with this.
Yeah, I want to tell the story about
We did not spend any
Vanderbilt.
money on college admissions. We did this ourselves.
Yeah.
And it was a thing. And we had to become college admissions experts.
Yes, we went to 22 different colleges that year when they were juniors.
Yeah.
And we visited them all, and we got
I
to
overplayed the East Coast thing as important, and so they were all on the East Coast.
well, sort of. We have one in the South.
Southeast Coast.
But the one who was in the South, we took them all to the South to Vanderbilt, and I was like, why are we here? Like, what is this, Nashville? Well, Nashville music. Well, Douglas is a musician. And Jordan had picked it for football school, and also he had the best grades, and he thought he could get in there. It was a reach, but we went there. And we sat in the admissions office for like an hour because, we were celebrities and we had to be hidden away or something. And this woman was giving us this spiel about the kind of people that they let in there. And they all had to be like super high-end athletes, top of the class, A+ average, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, why are our kids here? Like, what the hell? This is not us. I go, maybe I'm missing something. And I told Douglas, Douglas, let's go look at the music school because we've been to 21 colleges and you haven't even seen a music program yet.
So it's just, if you don't mind me jumping a little bit, Susan, they have a music very like
one
a
of
top
3 in the
5,
country
music conservatories there
for opera.
And Douglas was a really accomplished musician, and she goes, why don't we just go look at that? And so,
because we were doing the liberal arts thing.
So go ahead, Susan, finish.
Oh my God, we'd been to 21 colleges.
So
and
she and Douglas got up at 6 in the morning. The other 3 of us just like, no way. Good luck, you guys.
So music is my background. So I took him in there, and we sat down, and I made the appointment. The counselor at the school didn't make the appointment, so I had accidentally set up for an interview, not just a tour. I thought it was a tour, and the guy sits down, and he's like, Douglas told his whole story about how he was on the baseball team and the football team and in the music hall, and he played Rachmaninoff on the piano, and he was an opera singer and blah blah blah, and he gave this beautiful delivery of his experience. And the guy looked at him and said, "If you're everything you just said you are, we will have you.
You're in."
And my jaw dropped, and I got the chills. I just got the chills again thinking about it. And Douglas didn't understand what the guy said, right? So I'm like, so if he wants to go from music to the liberal arts side of the program, this is my first question, and could he switch if he just decided he didn't want to be a music major? And the guy was like, yeah, no problem. So he quit football and he took some music theory and he got in early decision.
So they had to come back for an
audition.
2 months later, audition on keyboard, audition on voice, and take a music theory course, which he crashed himself into music theory for 3 months. And that was it. He was in. He was in early decision.
And he said people were coming out of the room crying because you could audition for musical theater or opera. And the guy goes, well, let's hear you play piano. And, he cracked out the piano and he went for it. And they loved him there, but he eventually switched over, and his SATs had nothing to do with it. You know what I mean?
The point is he thrived in the liberal arts. He thrived as a history major. He thrived it had nothing to do with anything. He was, which is one of the interesting things to me. I feel like students that
felt
perform
like an imposter.
Yeah, I know he had a big imposter syndrome at the end. He's like, I feel like I pulled something off here, but. There's a weird thing that I think happens with some students, at least in most environments, is that they perform at whatever level they are accustomed to performing at. You know what I mean? It's like if you're a B+ student, you're B+, and you just it goes up and down based on the competitions. You're performing at a higher level, still getting a B+ if you're a B+ student. Weird. Is that a thing?
I'm not sure it's a thing, but it seems to make sense, right? That there's. Your environment really does shape how you behave. And in many ways, this story is, I think, the way admissions in many ways should be. It should be about actually getting to know who the applicant is and then figuring out if that institution is the right place for that applicant, right? And the problem is that most institutions and most programs, they're kind of generic. Right, it's not like this music program that you described. They're usually kind of you study physics here, you study physics there. It's the same physics, right? It's taught in the same way. There's this stuff is so generic and so cookie cutter that's why these processes are so ingrained. And it really should be something much more like that. That's what we try to do, at least in our admissions process. We truly try to understand who the applicants are and if they're going to thrive in our environment.
And you know what? Because they're kids, they don't know what the hell's going on, right? So the guy goes, "Let me give you a tour of the area," right? And then after the tour, I said, "How'd it go?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't know about this." I was like, "What? You don't want to go to Vanderbilt?" And he goes, "He had bad breath." I go, "Was he kissing you?" Like, geez. I go, "Douglas, do you know what just happened?" He's like, "Had no idea." Nope, nah, he had bad breath.
So
there's a great story about during the you remember the Boston bombing, marathon bombing? That happened during what was going to be planned to be the Harvard Admit weekend. And so they canceled the Admit weekend and they shut it down. And so none of the admitted Harvard students actually got to go to Harvard before making their decision. And that year, Harvard had the highest yield in its history. And that's primarily
the yield of
meaning the number of students that were accepted to Harvard who wound up matriculating. That basically by not actually seeing Harvard, by keeping it still in theory in their heads
as a fantasy.
That's a fantasy. It's way better than reality. So.
Yeah, it's true. I wouldn't let my daughter look at the dorm at Barnard because it looked like a jail cell. It was awful. And Martha Stewart went there. I go, she couldn't come slap some paint on the wall afterwards? Jesus, this place is a mess. Like, the lamps were broken, the levelers were crooked, and the bathrooms were gross. And I was like, just keep walking. I don't know. But she got in and she never complained. So, yeah, I wouldn't let her see it. But, after you see 20 colleges and you work with the people at your high school that are experts, you get kind of pissed because they're not that creative. And I think parents have to put in the hours and understand that their kid has to just get their face in there, and they just have to go and meet the people that are deciding whether they're in or out. And it's just a big cattle call. That's what I felt like at the beginning, because the first 10 we went to, I felt like we're just, what are we doing? We don't know what we're doing. And our kids were doing their interviews. Their interviews were great. Douglas knew exactly what to say. He was well versed. They taught him how to speak and told him, well, he was an opera singer, so he's a good performer. But I don't know. The parents can't. I mean, if your kid's like A+ average and has the best scores and all that, you're in great shape. But if you're white, you have to work a little harder. And I felt like we were taking 3 good spots somewhere. So it was a lot of work. It was. So I was tap dancing my way through the whole thing at the end.
It's a weird process.
I was like, Drew, you have to come on every trip. You have to be there. I want them to see your face. I want them to know who their dad is. Because I was playing that card. I had to. I had 3.
And
then they were in competition with each other. They had to outdo each other with school.
The point is, it was not something systematic as it should have been, nor was it something
I didn't like it.
Of the order that you're describing, where you're fitting a student as personhood, the studentness and personhood to a particular institution. I have to take a little break. Ben is here. We're going to take some calls in a second. And I'll just a couple more questions for him on how Minerva works and what people do to apply.
Something great about college, though.
It was like a big babysitter.
Oh, it's the best babysitting center.
And we're going to take a little break and be right back. Let me take a minute to tell you about Blue Mics. Over the 2 years we've been working with our friends at Blue Mics, the world has completely adapted to working and meeting virtually. So whether you know it or not, you probably spent a lot of time in front of a microphone. Now, take it from someone who has spent probably half my life on a microphone. Sounding good is extremely important. And because of Blue Mics, I have never sounded better. But a good mic isn't just for broadcasting. Quality audio makes a big impact on whomever is listening on the other end, from coworkers to clients to friends. Clear sound can make all the difference. Thanks to Blue Mics, you don't need complicated or expensive equipment to get professional results. For simple plug-and-play setups, try Blue Mic's Yeti series. plugs right into your USB port on your computer. Need something more robust? Blue's got an entire line of professional XLR mics like the Mouse or the Blueberry we use here in our studio, as well as the more compact Encore 300. I love it for clear quality sound when we travel. Bottom line, there is no excuse to be the one on the conference call who sounds like you're in a tunnel or underwater. I cannot say enough about Blue mics, and once you try one, you will never go back. To take your audio to the next level, just go to drdrew.com/blue. That is drdrew.com/BLUE. We are back with Ben Nelson. Ben, how does somebody hear about, apply to Minerva?
Well, easiest way is just to go to minerva.edu. And in fact, because we have applicants from all over the world, you can still apply for next fall if you go in the next couple of days. So just go to minerva.edu. The application is completely free. There are no application charges whatsoever. It's done all in an automated fashion online. You just have to have your camera and mic on. And I've been told that by almost all of our students that it is their favorite application to go through.
Is it just a series of tell us about yourselves, or what are they solving problems, or what is it?
It's all of the above. So it's questions about yourself. It's, of course, we ask for you to submit your transcript and your academic record. Minerva is a very demanding program. But yeah, we ask a number of questions to see how your brain works as well. And many of those questions are straightforward, and some of them are very, very much not straightforward. You just have to show up and do your best.
I'm trying to get some calls here. I'm going to get Josh up to the phone in just a second. Yeah, Josh, what's going on?
Hey, Dr. Drew. I wanted to kind of turn this into a mental health thing, because I know a lot of college students they find themselves alone from their parents for the first time. And that's when things like depression and anxiety can come up. And I'm not a psychoanalyst, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist or anything, but I really like psychoanalysis. And I know that psychoanalysis is trying to penetrate into the undergraduate programs just as a matter of education. This is what this is. This is what this looks like. Basic theory, the Oedipus complex, and so at least the children, or not the children, the college students will have an idea if something were to come up. Maybe there is something going on with me. Not maybe in their later 20s too, in their early 30s. So I just wanted to know what he thinks about including psychoanalytic education as a requirement for some of the undergrads.
Well, I think you're talking about psychiatric. Read the book Shrink, please. Read the book Shrink, about how psychoanalysis nearly ruined American psychiatry. And I think you're talking about really addressing and educating on sort of these basic life issues around mental health, which I think is a good idea. Do you have any kind of primer there, or anything like that? And I'm sure psychoanalysis get in some of the philosophy classes too. It was in my stuff.
So one of the many things that we do, as I mentioned, we teach these systems of thinking. But these systems of thinking are broken down into component parts, right? And so there are many things that our students learn as a requirement, which are extraordinarily useful in what we refer to as adulting and navigating real world and building resiliency, right? So for example, we teach emotional intelligence and how to both spot it and channel it and internalize it. We help students understand their own biases as well as biases of others that they interact with, right? And how to actually navigate that in an effective way. We teach students principles that are useful in almost anything that they do, like thinking about second and third order effects and unintended consequences, and this concept of emergent properties, which I know you're a fan of. And so there are all.
Did we talk about that last time? How did you know I was fascinated with emergence?
I just saw that you reacted to it. So,
that's a good pickup, because I don't talk about it very much because I don't fully understand it, but I know it's an important principle, and one day I'll be able to talk about it. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
So we train our students to learn about these things, but we also supplement a lot of that with programming that is co-curricular that helps our students build resiliency. Because not only is going to college a stressful experience, going to Minerva is triply stressful because you're not only going away to college, but for the vast majority of our students, they're leaving their country of origin, let alone city of origin. And if they haven't, 4 months into their college experience, they're leaving their country of origin. They have to cook for themselves. We don't offer cafeterias, right? They have to live like adults right as they start. So granted, they all live together in the same residence hall and there's professional staff there, but it's rapid adulting. And so if we didn't provide the kind of support and resiliency training that we do, mental health strains would be much, much harder to deal with for our students. And so we're highly conscious of how important that is.
Yeah, it is very common, as Josh pointed out, for first-year students to have a problem. In fact, one of the hidden phenomenon in college campuses in the sort of 80s and 90s, maybe early 2000s, was dropout freshman year, and they started developing programs to manage that.
Yeah, but your psychology is free.
Yeah, oftentimes.
I always tell my kids, please take advantage of the psychology department and get therapy because I'm already paying for it, and you're going to need it leaving when you walk out the door. I want you to make sure you get that before you come back.
But it is important to destigmatize it, right? Because a lot of students from a lot of cultures, the idea of actually talking to somebody has a stigma. And we make absolutely sure to destigmatize those conversations and to make sure that support is there if students need it. And even if they don't, that they have the tools to help them build that resiliency so that they can deal with many problems that other students don't know how to deal with.
So I just wanted to show you that dose of Dr. Drew cup.
Okay, I'll hold it up a second.
Yeah, hold it up because this guy, it came from Snapfish.
Oh.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So Ben, here we go.
See, I had those. I have a whole bunch of them. I don't know what to do with. If anybody wants one,
fantastic.
We don't do that show. It's a collector's item now. So yeah, all our coffee mugs come from Snapfish. How about that? I've been using them for years and years.
That's
so.
fantastic.
Agnes, I've clicked on you. If you're around, come on up to the podium here. And again, you'll be streaming on multiple platforms if you come on up. There we go. Hey there, Agnes. And you're still muted. You're on mute. You got to unmute also. Still muted, Agnes. I wish I had a button there. Clubhouse. There you are, Agnes.
Thank you, Dr. Drew. There I am.
There you are.
Hi, Dr. Drew. So I was hearing his instant adulthood comment, and I was thinking, what's changed in our society that the kids are not leaving home prepared for the world?
You're wondering if Ben has an opinion about that, since he's dealing with a lot of young people?
Many things.
Yes, where's the gap?
We'll lay that one at your feet, sir.
Well, I mean, I think about, I have young daughters who are 6 and 11. And I think about 6 as a particularly important milestone for me, because when I was 6 years old, I was in first grade, and I had the key to the apartment around my neck. School would let out early, 1 o'clock. I'd walk home alone, undo the door. My mom would leave me a plate of food. I would eat it, put the dish away, leave the house, lock the door, go to a friend's place, and come back at 6 o'clock in time for dinner. And of course, there were no cell phones. There was nothing. So my parents had no idea where I was. No one had a clue. And that was normal. And today, if I was to do that with my daughter, I'm fairly sure I would be thrown in jail.
For sure.
I think
for sure.
Legal. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm even conscious of it. I don't know if I could bring myself to raising my own daughters the way I knew it was good for me to be raised. And so there is really something in our collective psyche, in our law, in our risk mitigation profile, which is doing, I believe, irreparable damage to our and harm to our children. I in many ways see it in our applicants more so than our students, because there is a bit of a filter when you get into Minerva to decide, yep, I'm going to go and live as an adult right away. That there's a self-selection there, that a lot of the students who collapse, that need to go to the protected bubble of the campus, many of them don't show up at Minerva.
Have you guys, I'm looking up the title for this thing, the Netflix series, let's see, it's Netflix Toddlers Doing Old Enough, it's called, Old Enough. And it's a show where they essentially follow behind 18-month-old and 2-year-olds in diapers who go out into the world and
grocery shopping
and grocery shop and get buses and Ubers, and it's called Old Enough. And when my daughter put it on last night, I was like, this is odd that we are gone from we're not gonna let kids do anything. Now we're gonna, at least in Japan.
They were Japanese.
I'm just saying,
okay,
it just
they
was
weren't
like
American.
Toddlers walking through the world doing adult tasks that we even are fascinated by that. Is that because we've pulled so far away from children doing adult tasks, or is it because we want that back? I don't know, or both. It's very interesting. It caught my attention as a change of some type. I hope it's a good change, Agnes.
Well, at 10 years old, I would take my bicycle with my 3 brothers and sisters who were 4 years younger than me to a park that was 2 miles down the road, and we'd be gone all day on Saturday and come back when it was dark.
Yeah.
And no one questioned my parents about their ability because the kids were under my supervision. But at 21, I was married with a child, owned a house, had a degree, working a full-time job, and I see my granddaughter, 21, who doesn't know how to do laundry, can't make breakfast, has no clue about some of the basics of taking care of herself as an adult. Now, I'm just wondering, what's changed? Where's the gap?
What do we think? It's just, you know what it is? It's the pendulum. It's the parenting pendulum. We felt like we're all here telling our stories about, can you believe it? We didn't think that was good. Or we, at least if we look back, we're not thinking it was good. So we did now the opposite. So, and that's not good either. We need to get a middle zone. And I just talked to my friend Bob Forrest a few hours ago, and we've been worried about, he's been really struggling with treating millennials. He couldn't get them to engage. They couldn't, all this stuff. They didn't have an adult life didn't have meaning to them, essentially. To go back to sort of, what was the psychiatrist's name that wrote the book after the concentration camp? Somebody help me. Somebody in Restream is going to help me. Anyway, he talked about, life finding meaning being the important thing. And for millennials, that was really, really hard, and still continues to be hard. I have faith that they will figure it out, but that apparently, and you can, Ben, back me up on this, that Gen Z is finding it easier. Are you finding that to be true, or is that just something we see in the recovery area?
Yeah, I think
Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl. Yeah, I think they believe they're finding it easier. But I actually think that Gen Z is in for a bit of disillusionment. I consider myself to be extraordinarily lucky that I found my purpose in life at the age of 35.
Mm-hmm.
And that was to, kind of be on this crusade to fix global education. But I didn't, at the age, even though I had these core ideas when I was in college, I didn't realize at the time that I needed to go and start my own university, or I needed to go and champion for educational reform all over the world.
Right.
And if I did, Minerva would never have gotten started, because I actually needed the 15 ensuing years to go out into the wilderness and figure out stuff. Right. And grow and learn and, learn how to run organizations and how to manage people and how to hire well and how to make really bad decisions and recover from them. And I needed to do it in a way, in an area where it wasn't life or death, or at least it wasn't for me, where, hey, you order a mug and, it doesn't turn out as you can, so you want it to, so you call customer service and you get a refund, right? So, having a bit of that low stakes real world school for a decade plus is what enabled me to pursue my life's goal, my purpose. Whereas if I were to tell myself early on, hey, I've got to go and I got to start in university, what would I have done? I'd have gotten a PhD. I would have become an academic. I would try to become a university administrator. And then maybe in my 60s, I'd figure out, oh, maybe I should go and start a new university. And I'd fail, right? So
Right.
I think that this kind of know your purpose, know why you are on this planet, and know your life's pursuit at 18, at 19, at 20, at 21, I think it's folly. And I think having that pressure is setting kids up for failure.
And tell us about what you're observing. First of all, what's the makeup of the student body? Is there a pattern to that? I know you're pulling from all over the world, or maybe the current pattern is maybe a easier way to talk about that. And then what are you seeing? What are you seeing in terms of the next round of students?
Yeah, it's very much fascinating. We talk about emergent properties, but every year the student makeup is quite different. But you do see, like, for example, every year the United States is still the largest segment of students, but it's only about 12%. And all the other countries are in, the single digit percentage, but there's a very big difference. So, for example, interestingly enough, the second largest country from which we get students from is the Ukraine. So 8% of our students are from the Ukraine. Which obviously over the past couple of months has been very, very challenging, especially for those students, to deal with and continue to be able to focus on school given everything that's going on in the real world. But every year, that kind of large preponderance of students changes, right? And so, 1 year we'll have a lot of students from Vietnam, another year from Kenya, another year from Nigeria, another year from Brazil, another year from Kazakhstan, and it just changes where the applicants come from. Of course, the ones that qualify in, because again, the process is challenging. But one of the interesting things that we see from an emergent property perspective is that, strangely enough, when you talk one-on-one with any given Minerva student, you can't really place them. You can't say, oh, you're clearly from such country, or you're from this class, or you're from this background. They're thoughtful, they're humble, they have a really interesting systematic approach to thinking. But there's no question that the classes themselves, the incoming class, has some kind of common characteristic. So even though you can't disaggregate it to the individual, as a group, the class that graduated in 2019 is appreciably different than the class that graduated in 2020, which is appreciably different than the class that graduated in 21 or 22 or 23. And so that really is a fascinating thing to see, the emergent property that is formed around these students, despite the fact that you can't really identify them individually as belonging to that category.
Interesting. So yeah, Ukraine, you struck a chord with me, because I was thinking about I've been worried about the lockdowns and how much damage that has done to particularly sort of middle childhood and younger adolescents. And one of the things that struck me when you see all these, hundreds of thousands and millions of immigrants heading over to Poland, it's primarily women and their children. And they put a microphone in front of the woman's face, and every single one of them said the same thing, which was, it's terrible, it's horrible, I'm worried about my husband. But these kids have been out of school for 2 weeks. We have to get them back in school. It's been 2 weeks. Are you kidding? 2 weeks. And I thought, we did it for 2 years. 2 years, and nobody seemed concerned about it. And in the middle of a war, the Ukrainian mothers were worried about missing 2 weeks of school. Put them in a Polish-speaking school, figure it out, learn that language. What do you feel about what we've done to kids with this lockdown in the last couple of years? Thank you. Striking back. Thank you. Thank you. Tom's point.
I would have been yelling too.
Yes.
I think that actually is an indictment of the rot in our schooling. When I started Minerva, I went around and I was talking to a bunch of potential funders. And my usual spiel about Minerva, especially back then, was I spent half an hour talking about the curriculum, talking about what it is that we're going to teach and how we're going to teach it. And then I'll talk about the international rotation and stuff like that. And I looked at, and I was sitting across from all of these Stanford graduates, Harvard graduates, and I see this puzzled look on their face. And they look at me and they say, why are you spending so much time talking about the education? Everyone knows you don't learn anything in college.
Oh, that's not true.
And it was so bad that they couldn't even conceive of how classroom learning was relevant. It's not just that they saw, oh boy, schools are not doing a good job. They were just checked out of the entire process. And I think that's what we've been seeing over the past couple of years, because when you actually go and interrogate a family and say, why do you want your kid to go to the best school? The answer is because I want them to go to the best college. And when you say, well, why do you want them to go to the best college? You say, because I want them to have the brand. And when you say, but are they going to learn anything? Like, no, nobody learns anything in school. And so I think we've become numb to having kids out of school because we've lost collective faith in schools to begin with.
Well, that
why
was why I
have to be reformed.
Yeah, and it's why I was such a nut with the college admissions. I got a lot of education in college. I got insane education. I got a really high quality liberal arts education, and I had my ass handed to me for 4 years. And I tell people they were going for something very specific. It was monastery meets prison. Those were sort of the models that they were operating from. I'm not kidding. And abusiveness was sort of their calling card. I'm just really, really abusive sort of stuff. And they would say things like, I don't care what you know. I want to know what you don't know. And we're going to keep questioning until I figure that out. And when you go, can I miss this test? They go, yes, there is a condition in which you can miss this test. You're death. Otherwise be there. And that was it. There was no conversation beyond that. And I was taught to think, and I had a relatively lazy brain at the beginning, and I value what I came away with. That's why I'm so fascinated by what you're doing. We've talked about, you and I on my podcast, the importance of a quality liberal arts education, which is people don't even know what that is, let alone have lost faith in it. Right. They never knew it in the first place, I'm afraid. And it was a very significant and important principle. One of the founding principles of this country was to have a liberally educated electorate so they could understand the responsibility of self-governance. Well, that's gone. So anyway, well, listen, it has been a privilege to talk to you. Where do you want people to go to find more, to keep up with you, to be a part of the solution? Give me some places to go if people want to learn more and do more.
Yeah, absolutely. So Minerva.edu is the best place to go if you're interested in the university and applying to it and supporting the amazing students that we have in employing some of the graduates that are coming out of Minerva. You can all find it at Minerva.edu. You can follow us at Minerva University or at Minerva Project, both for our own university as well as our work with other institutions. And that's on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc.
And for you, should they follow you somewhere?
And people are welcome to follow Minerva. It's my primary social media
Minerva.
presence.
Just go to Minerva, go to Minerva, go to Minerva.
Minerva, and then you'll find me.
We're going to go to Minerva. Well, listen, congratulations on this, and whatever I can do to continue to support you, please do let me know. And I hope whatever you're doing as you travel around, that you'll land back here once in a while. We'll hope to see you soon.
That'd be great. Thank you so much, Drew.
Thank you. There you go. Ben Nelson, everybody. Thank you so much. We appreciate a lot of lively conversation.
I wish my kids were still in college.
so the babysitting could ensue. so it was fun, wasn't it?
It was expensive
It
though.
was expensive, but it was fun.
I was really pissed that we didn't get more help from the high school to get them into their colleges, though.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work.
Kat Dunleavy was saying he or she, I don't know who that is, had
And
a
the system was definitely flawed.
similar experience to mine over at Dartmouth over 20 years ago. Yeah, my when was that? It was 40 years ago. 40 years ago? Oh, shit. Yeah, but it was a whole different deal. It was, again, think about monastery. It literally was monastery versus prison. You had a cell with a wire bed. I mean,
Barnard
prisons
was
are
the
better
worst.
set up. It was way worse than that. Believe
It
me, I would
was
love
not.
that. Oh, they had the cement walls up the side with a drain in the middle. They just rinse it down. There was a one desk that was 100 years old, and a window that barely would open, and a water gas, those water radiators,
Right.
heaters, and the bed was wire frame like prison bed.
Remember Paulina got an air conditioning unit, and she had a girl that came in and slept between her.
Wouldn't leave.
Yeah, on the floor and ate chocolate cake all the time.
Yeah, and you would be told, we're expecting you not to sleep and not to do anything else.
She had a mental health problem too. She ended up dropping out. But,
oh, did she?
Yeah, but it was like the stuff, that these kids could live through was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Douglas had a shrine to live in.
Oh my God, it was ridiculous.
I know. Jordan's room was really cool.
Yes, Jordan was great too.
Jordan had a nice.
By the way, same school.
He didn't
I
even
went
have to share a room.
Same school that I went to, but had great facilities.
But he was miserable.
Completely rid of the whole thing. But
so cold.
But he got the really heavy education.
Yeah, he came back a socialist.
Yeah, but the math training was at the same level it was when I was there. So.
My parents tried to do everything they could to convince me against going to college. They were very rebellious Texan homeschoolers. Right, exactly. Right. So they would tell me stories about college experiences like yours, Drew.
I went to college later. I was 27 when I went to UCLA, and I remember listening to the teachers. I wasn't a Republican, but my dad was. And I remember them teaching and thinking, I have to write my paper exactly the way he's saying it because I'm not going to pass if I don't. So I always had.
If you let any of your dad's points of view
I had
trickle in, you'd be thrown out of the classroom.
Just go with the, with.
He was a World War II veteran. Spent 3 years in the South Pacific.
You just had to go to the left, and you just had to write the paper and get through. And I see how kids get indoctrinated to that. When they get out, because the professors that's all they're teaching. And I didn't have a problem with it. I found it to be fascinating that there was no right wing teaching.
So Whiskey, who says I look down a lot. I'm looking at the restream. I'm watching you guys. I'm trying to keep up with you dudes.
Whiskey likes, and I want to read. Whiskey liked it.
I want to read Kat Dunleavy, which is Dartmouth is very posh now. Yes, like Amherst, same thing. I shared a bathroom with 20 girls. One bathroom, 20 girls, 2 stalls. It would get clogged by the end of the weekends, and we'd have to use the bathroom at the science building. Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with
it's like camping, it's the way it is.
So there you go. All right, so listen, tomorrow, as I said, Megan Dom, who's got lots of interesting ideas, and she's got a new book coming, and there she is. Check her out. I think her last book was What the Problem with Everything, if I remember right. It was really good. Oh. And she sent it to me and said, I think you might like this. And I was like, oh my God, it's so good. And she is sort of my era. And she was talking about what that wave of feminism was like, what it was, what that perspective was. And she was vilified for even bringing forth a little piece of historical information. She wasn't saying, she was just sort of musing about how odd it is that things are the way they are now, given how they were then. And she was completely drummed out of her circles for daring to bring these things up. Things have changed. I'll be curious.
We all go through it, I guess.
Yes. Be curious to see how she has solved.
Don't forget to promote the bobblehead, honey.
Okay, bobbleheads, everyone. Susan needs to move these bobbleheads.
No, I don't need to move them. They're cool.
Okay,
they're
cool.
a collector's item.
There it is. drdrew.com/shop.
I want to put the picture that Harley put up there, or that Leopold with the promotion.
Okay.
It's a cuter picture.
Caleb, you mean with the aliens?
Yeah, the aliens, or the one with the brain. The brain was
Leopold
very
in
popular.
here too. So
and
we
Harley couldn't come last time because he had COVID.
Let's warn people about what's going on with us going forward.
What's going on with us?
Travel.
Oh.
So we're going to do next week. We're going to do.
Is there something you need to tell me?
Yeah, I know. So, Monday and Tuesday, we're going to do shows next week. And then we're going to do a couple from New York the following week. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll be back. We'll be back live from New York.
Okay. All 3 days?
The week after. Yeah. We're going to do a couple of shows next week, and then we will be gone for a little stint, and then because we have to go to Austin.
So in Austin, so we'll be seeing the Booth Boys in Austin. We'll see what kind of shenanigans we can come up with there.
Oh, God.
And then we will be from New York for 3 days and then gone for
3 or
another
4
week, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
then we're gone for a week.
Yes, I have to give a talk in Bermuda.
Vacation.
And
We've
that
only
should be
got
interesting.
Blue Mike as our ad, so we
Okay.
can take a break.
Okay. Are we going to try to do Friday when we get back or just not worry about
I
that?
don't know, maybe.
Maybe Friday
I think
the
Caleb
29th.
needs the work, so we'll find something else for
Right.
Caleb to
keep
do.
driving us, my friend.
Caleb can. We'll get Caleb to go and
I'll do it
something
8
else
nights a
over
week.
All right.
there. We'll figure something out.
All right. Well, we thank you, Caleb, for producing the show. And thank you, Susan, for participating and producing. And I will see you tomorrow. We will be at our usual time at 3 o'clock tomorrow. See you then. These are things called PDE5 inhibitors, right? Do you know how erections happen? Either you guys?
Well, yeah, you look at a
No, I mean how they physiologically happen.
Yeah, you got like this carnivorous tissue, right? And then
Carnivorous.
Yeah.
Carnivorous tissue. Well done. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources